don't care. Because Mexico did what they wanted, and they had an agenda, but the United States had no business doing that. The United States made a problem in the treaty. Remember I told you the Treaty of 41? The Treaty of 41 is really interesting. But here's the language of treaties. I want to educate you now. What really happened here? If you want to read this, I know this is small, but you might have something over there for treaties. But this treaty says the United States can make a treaty with any country as long as they don't do one thing. What do you think that one thing is? Okay? They cannot, if I find the right side, violate anyone's constitutional rights. They can do whatever they want. They can make a treaty on anything, on everything, but they can't do this. They can't violate anyone's constitutional rights in the treaty. If they do violate the Constitution, then it says that the constitutional language, if it's violated, the treaty is invalid. Whoa! Treaty's invalid? Your constitutional rights are telling you that? Where does it say that? Where does it say that you can't do that? You need to know that, don't you? Hang on. I'm going to show you until I find the right one. Okay? The reason it says that is right here. This is Article 5 of the amendment. Do we have Article 5 up there? The only way the United States can take your land, only one way. How many of you have ever heard eminent domain? Eminent domain means when the state or the city or the federal government say, oh, you know what, your house is right where we're going to build a big museum. We gotta take your house. That's called eminent domain. They have the right to do that. You can go to court, you're going to lose. Because this Fifth Amendment says they can do it. And this Fifth Amendment says they have to negotiate with you to get a fair and just settlement. Do you think they negotiated for eminent domain with your ancestors? Hell no, they didn't care about it. So we know they don't have a contract for their property in the 1800s or the 1900s. But this little Fifth Amendment says right here that nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life, limb, or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property. Wow. Without due process of law. That's the Fifth Amendment. Those are your constitutional rights. Why is that important? Because what they did was illegal. And I'm going to tell you why it's illegal. You remember I told you at the very beginning, I told you I was going to take you on a journey. I told you at the very beginning that your ancestors were U.S. citizens. Remember? After 12 months. Do you remember that? Okay, this is Article 14. Article 14 is the same thing as Amendment 15 or 5. And that says the same thing. It's just this is for the states and that's for federal law. This is the Constitution. And your ancestors lived on that land more than 12 months. Or I think they did. Because if they did, they violated their constitutional rights. You can't do that what they just did. If your ancestors are U.S. citizens, can they negotiate with Mexico? Think about it now. Can they, if they wanted to take your land and say, you know what, where are you from? I'm Irish. Okay, we're going to give Ireland money for your house. Can they do that now? No. Why? Because it's against the Fifth Amendment. But the reason they got away with it is because in those two treaties, the 41 and 23 treaty, they called your descendants, your ancestors, Mexican nationals. It actually said that in the treaty. They called them Mexican nationals. Why did they do that? Because they knew they could get away with it if they call them Mexican nationals. Because if they call them U.S. citizens, they can't give Mexico the money. They got to deal with you directly. Eminent domain. And that's what happened here. They dealt with us as Mexican nationals, and your ancestors were U.S. citizens. Now, I told some of you earlier, you better be able to prove that. Because if you can't prove that, I think the U.S. courts are going to be tough to beat. But we can prove it. Elmer has on up here a very important part. You see, we have an ancestor that we had named Jose, me, and Elmer. But I'm not talking just us. We're talking everybody. I want them to everybody to be smart. We have an ancestor, and I asked Elmer, do you have any document that shows our ancestors paying a poll tax? And he said, yeah. This was at 3 o'clock in the morning when I thought about this. I said, because if you got a document that said he paid poll tax, that means he was a U.S. citizen. And if he's a U.S. citizen, Mexico had no business paying the money that they owed the United States paid. This is the violation of the Fifth Amendment. But in these two treaties, it says they were Mexican nationals, which was a lie. But this is the way they needed to have it so they could pull the deal off to pay the oil companies. You see how amazing this story is? They used your ancestors as patsies because they knew your nature. They knew you weren't smart in those days, nobody was educated, and nobody could blame you. Because you didn't know the language, you didn't know the system, and they got away with it. That was in 1941. And here I am 74 years later telling you the real story. And I challenge anyone to tell me I'm wrong. If you do your research, you'll see you're going to find what I did. It's going to make you angry. So the poll tax is up there. The problem with that is you have to understand a little history about the poll tax. The poll tax was started in the 1830s, 1840s. In different states. Every state had a different poll tax. What was the significance of the poll tax? The poll tax was a way to keep you from voting. You and your ancestors. But early on, the poll tax was used to collect money for like the Civil War. Why? Because the states needed money to fight wars against each other for slavery. That was in 1860. So poll taxes already existed, but they weren't used for voting yet in some states. Texas started with the poll tax for voting in 1902. But they used it early on to collect money for other things. The poll tax is a way to prove that you're a U.S. citizen. So all the documents that you have that you guys have shown me, and I've been here for 6 months in Texas, and I have seen people show me documents and documents, and I said, do you have anything that shows poll tax? They look at me, what? I don't even know anything about poll taxes. Do you have an ancestor that's been paying poll taxes after 1849? We happen to have our ancestor in 1851, 1854, and 1857. He was paying poll taxes for the land that he lived on. He was a U.S. citizen, and if that's true, then he had the protection of the Fifth Amendment. They violated his Fifth Amendment. That means this treaty is invalid. And that's what we're trying to sue the United States for. Because this was all a scam to pay oil companies. And they used your ancestors and the money that would have changed your lives and your family's lives to do it. If that don't get you mad, I don't know what will. But you're seeing what I'm giving you. The problem with it is, you have the situation now, and this is what it meant for them. Has anybody ever heard this? The ends justify the means? This is the way a lot of governments run how they do things. Why? Because you know what? Sometimes the ends justify the means. In other words, whatever you got to do to get this done, to fight Hitler, then do it. If that means cheating your families, that's what they had to do. Because Hitler was a menace. We all know that. Hitler was a bad man. And we understand that. But they had no business doing what they did to our families. Now, you all remember the Japanese? They herded them and they put them in concentration camps here in the United States. They compensated them in, I think it was the 60s. They compensated them for the wrong that they did to them.
$1 million per family.
What?
$1 million per family.
$1 million per family. Did you guys get any money? No. Do you feel you deserve any? No. And this is another important thing to remember. Before one bullet was fired in World War II, our ancestors were the collateral damage. For those of you that don't know what collateral damage is, I'm going to tell you. Does anybody remember the bombing in Oklahoma City? They blew the whole building up, those two guys or one guy or whatever. His name was McVeigh. They interviewed McVeigh and they asked him, why would you do this? You killed innocent children. There was kids in there, babies. Daycare center, he didn't care. Because he hated the government, but he blew up the whole building and killed everybody no matter who they were. What crime did a little kid commit against him? But when they interviewed him, he said something very interesting. Don't you feel bad for killing all those innocent people? He said, that was collateral damage. He goes, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Why would he say that? Because when he spent 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, he was trained and he was fighting. And he was making decisions. If there's one terrorist in that building and they need to get him out, and then he's hiding behind a family of 12 people, they fired the rocket and they killed everybody. And the American government said, collateral damage, we're sorry, but if they hide behind families, we got no choice, we got to kill them. And they were killing, the United States killed a lot of innocent people out there. Tough position to be in, I know. You got a terrorist hiding behind families. But they did it. And that's where he learned it. Now you understand more about why he blew up that building, because he was trained by the American government to do the same things over there to those people. So when he came back here, his training still was in his head. I'm sorry, they were collateral damage. I didn't want anything to harm them, but I got to send a signal to the United States, and he had an agenda. Don't want to get into that, but that's what collateral damage means, that they used somebody else. They didn't mean to do it, but they had to do it. That's what this deal was in 1949. They probably didn't want to do it, but they were pressured by the Nazis. They had to do something. In 1941, November 19th, this deal was signed by the United States and Mexico. And this deal was accepted. Cardenas was happy. You gave him $193 million. If I gave you $193 and I said, you can keep this money, all you got to do is give Elmer $40, would anybody have a problem with that? You're getting the money for nothing. That's what Camacho did. He knew the money was in his hand. He could do whatever he wanted. He didn't have to pay you. Why did he have to pay you? There was no language in there for your ancestors to be paid. It was a setup. They knew it. And now you're starting to identify what we are identifying. And that is that this treaty is invalid. If this treaty is invalid, what do we care about Mexico getting the money now? I don't care. They can keep that money. If the treaty is invalid, there's a problem. Why is there a problem if the treaty is invalid? because you just proved that they were U.S. citizens, and they can't do that. If it's invalid, they owe us money or the land. And that's what we're challenging, and we're going to go to court for. We are going to do that, to tell them the treaty is illegal. It's invalid because these people were U.S. citizens. So you need to go home and get the poll tax. Get your by the way, where are the poll taxes?
The majority of them are in state archives in Austin, Texas.
Okay, you need to find your ancestors paying poll taxes. Because see, here's what I'm going to tell you. We got ours. You know, for my family, we're ready. That's why we're ready to go to court. But we want all 433 people to join forces. But if you don't find that document, you can't prove that he was on that land past 12 months, you ain't going to get a dime. Because that's the law. The law states these were U.S. citizens. Then you do violate the constitutional right. If you can't prove that it was a U.S. citizen, then you're not going to get nothing. You're not going to get justice. So it's important that each and every one of you spread the word. Get people to get the documents. Give it to us as a copy. Don't give us any originals. Give us your copies of your originals that you find in Cameron County, Willacy County, whatever county you're in, and get those documents of your ancestors paying poll taxes. By the way, does anybody know what poll taxes, how much they were back in 1850? $1 plus a county tax of 50 cents. But your ancestors had a hard time paying it. Go ahead.
How much time do we have to get it through?
Say it again.
How much time do we have? Is month, year, or?
Whenever this case gets accepted, we're going to go to court. Whoever can't prove it is going to be out of luck. So what I'd say, within a year, you're either going to have to find this or you're going to have problems. That's all I'm warning you. Go ahead.
How far back do we have to go with the poll tax?
You want to answer it?
Well, actually, this poll tax started in 1848. So you can start from 1848 on out. The first county that we formed here in South Texas was Cameron County. There was no Hidalgo County, so the majority will be found there. I'm going to show you a little example of that right now.
This is Elmer Sierra, otro primo. And all of us are Sierras, and we're all fighting for the same thing. Go ahead, sir.
Wouldn't it be more prudent, the more you have copies of it, the better off you are?
Oh my God!
I have 350 pages for 20 years of poll taxes, so 1848.
But that's what I'm trying to get him, is that
What
the more
is your name?
documentation you have,
What's your first name?
Francisco.
Francisco. You hit it right on the head. Let me tell you why it's important what he just said. It's very important what he just said. If we file a lawsuit and none of you can find any example of your ancestors paying poll taxes, you can't prove they're U.S. citizens. We can't. We have a document. We have 3 documents that show our ancestors paying poll taxes. But if we go to the court with just one case and say, here we are, Jose Francisco Cavazos, we got our stuff. I don't know about everybody else, but we got our stuff. You know what they're going to say? Wait a minute. If this was just one, then the rest of them were Mexican nationals. This one fell in the crack. That means nobody else, everybody else is not going to get nothing. And because you're the only one who was a mistake made back in 1941, it's not going to be easily proved as fraud. And that's what we're trying to prove, fraud. Fraud, you have to prove intent. They knew everybody was a U.S. citizen, but did wrong for everybody. If it was just one case, then, and the rest of them can't prove it, then we look like we slipped through the crack, and it's not fraud. Because that's what we're trying to argue, that the United States defrauded out of our ancestors' money. So his point Get as many documents as you can. Hell yeah, you better. You better have them, from, if you can, from 49 all the way on up to 62 or 70, whatever, 18, whatever it is. Because the more documents that you show your ancestors shows that he was a U.S. citizen. If you're a U.S. citizen, they had no business giving the money to Mexico. So it is important that we all show as many as we can to prove that it wasn't just one that fell in the crack, that we all show that we're all U.S. citizens and it was a fraud created on these people. Because if you can't prove that there was more than one, we're going to have trouble. We need as many as we can. We need as many years as we can to show these people were all American citizens by the law. Because, look, you're smart people. If somebody violates your rights and you're a U.S. citizen, you can go to court. You have the right to do that. But if you're a Mexican national, you can't come to the United States courts. You have to be very selective of what your rights are as a Mexican national. You can go to Mexico and file against them. And by the way, there's two cases I told you about. How much time am I running along here, guys? 3:30. My God, nobody's left. I'm happy. Okay. This was the first case that happened in 1984. Asociación de Reclamantes. Okay, Reclamantes. Man, I'm so thirsty. This case was very important. It was filed by a lady named Amita Zarate. I have a lot of respect for anybody, including these people, that they try to fight in the United States. I give them my hat. I tip my hat. In this case, she made one mistake. She didn't know it then, but she tried. She went to the United States court and she filed a lawsuit and filed it against Mexico in a U.S. court. It didn't work. Because those federal judges ruled against them and said, hey, you can't sue Mexico in the United States. Because what happens is, we have no jurisdiction over a sovereign government. We can't tell Mexico what to do. They're a government. So if you file a lawsuit and we rule they have to do something and give you money, we can't make them give you money. We're the United States. The only thing we allow here is lawsuits relevant to the United States. So the ADR lost because they can't file a lawsuit against a sovereign country in the United States. They were devastated. They tried. I got to give it to them.
One more thing?
Go ahead.
If they got an attorney, okay, and if he was Anglo, he wouldn't have told them, okay, that you cannot bring it up because you're going against another country. Okay, but the attorney, if they have an attorney, should have enlightenment as to we can't do this because of this.
You're right.
Okay, but and even today, you have a lot of Hispanic attorneys that would not touch any of these cases.
Right.
Okay, the only thing on my question is, why don't the attorneys that are Hispanic want to get involved?
May I answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to NYU Law School. We have a Hispanic Civil Rights Center. We made an appointment to meet with the director who teaches Hispanic civil law to these law students who are going to be lawyers. Run by a white lady. And this is NYU Law School. So she said, I'm really embarrassed. We don't even have Hispanic law professors teaching Hispanic civil law here in this law school. And all they teach is by textbook. So can you imagine that? If I go there and want to be a lawyer, I'm being taught by somebody who's just reading something out of a textbook.
I've never experienced.
Never experienced.
I was just curious,
Yeah, yeah.
because I've got some relatives that are attorneys.
Please
and-
bring
and
them.
the ranch that was ours, nobody has had the gumption or whatever to say, okay, why don't we try it?
But I've tried it against the community foundation.
Bring your relatives to the lawyers. I'd love to hear what they have to say when I give them the, my whole presentation report. I got one more case, and then I'll let these two guys talk, because I'm just giving you the history, and I'm gonna wrap this up. This is what happened in 1991. 91 and ended in 1994. Does anybody know about this case? This is probably the one case that nobody knows about. Has anybody ever heard of this case? No? This was a lawsuit brought by another group of land descendants, land grant descendants. 1,000 people in Texas. Everywhere I go, nobody knows who these people are. I wish I could meet these people. And they filed a lawsuit in 1994. And this is an interesting lawsuit because this one, we have documentation about. This one is the one that almost got me. These people came close to winning, but I'm going to tell you why they lost. This lawsuit was headed by a guy named Stephen Schneebly. He's out of Miami University. He's the guy that we're talking to right now. He's a professor of law at Miami University. He graduated from Harvard first in his class. This guy's not a dummy. He's a very smart man. And he lost this case. And I'm going to tell you why he lost this case, but he had the right idea. He sued the United States because they violated your ancestors' 5th and 14th Amendment. Remember what I showed you about the 5th Amendment? This guy went to court and he told the court, you can't do that. And what happened in this court case, it's got 24 paragraphs. You guys go online and read it for yourself. It's a very interesting case. Because what happened is they didn't disagree with it, that your ancestors' rights were violated. As a matter of fact, they even say in this lawsuit, why are you suing the United States? We gave the money to Mexico. Mexico has your money. Why don't you sue them? That was actually a judge that said that. It's documented. You can read it online. The problem with that is this. The United States came from Mexico, and they had no business. And they knew this guy was right. But these people were U.S. citizens, and they should have never had the money go to Mexico. But the way this judge beat this lawsuit was, he said, you're too late. We know you have some valid points about the constitutional rights of the individuals. But, if I can find it, you remember that little treaty I told you about in 1941? I can't find the document now, but you remember it. Oh, here it is. You remember this little treaty in 1941? The judge says, remember I told you how smart they were? They protected their butts by saying the language now overrides the 23 Convention, and nobody can sue us for anything. Well, your statute of limitations is expired. And I'm going to tell you what statute of limitations is. It's a legal way to get you not to get justice. It stops you. Because here's what they said. If your ancestors felt that they got violated in 1941 when this treaty was created, they should have come to the courts and they should have filed a lawsuit. 1941. Think about 1941. What were you doing, what was your family doing in South Texas in 1941? Do you think they were educated enough to go and file a lawsuit? Do you think they were rich enough to spend tons of money on a lawyer and not get flim-flammed by lawyers? In 1941, where were your ancestors? I'll tell you where they were. Joining the army. There was a war going on. And by the way, in 41, your ancestors were probably happy. Why? Because they told Camacho, here's the money, pay the people whenever you want, we're done with it. The United States was like this. And I'm telling you, if you read some of the books I have, they were cold-blooded because they just wanted for the oil companies. So in 1941, your ancestors are fighting a war, but they're told that by Camacho, checks in the mail, you're going to get your money. He never denied anybody that he wasn't going to pay. He told people that, and by the way, it's documented, that they were going to pay. Yeah. And he reminded me, remember, there was language for the oil companies that we paid, but not your ancestors. Why? They didn't care. They knew they were greasing Camacho's palms with a lot of money, trying to get him to stop selling oil to the Nazis. That's all they cared about. So what happens is, this guy that files a lawsuit says, but wait a minute. In 1941, everybody was at war, and they were told they were going to get paid. That's part of the argument in that lawsuit, by the way, by the Alliance of Descendants. I don't know where I put it. And they're arguing this, and the guy says, I'm sorry, but your statute of limitations is over. The 6-year clock is gone. It ended in 1947. I wasn't born until 1948. That's what the official word is in 1994, when the second lawsuit, and the final lawsuit, was ever tried against the United States. And those people lost. They spent a lot of money, and they spent a lot of time researching and everything. But the problem was this, and I'm going to stop here after this, so I'll let Arnulfo and Elmer take it from here. They couldn't get over or around this treaty. And I, myself, and Arnulfo, and Elmer have discovered there is a way around this treaty. If you can invalidate this treaty, it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, the money they gave Mexico is an admission of guilt by the United States. That means if the courts agree with us, the three of us, then what happens is the United States has to negotiate on today's money. You think that land is worth more than $193 million today? You better believe it. You better believe it, because those settlements that you look in that book doesn't even consider oil. It's just the property value. If we have this treaty null and voided, it's start over and negotiate now. You think that's going to blow the United States mind? You better believe it. So you see, it is critical for you to prove who your ancestors were. If you're connected, the genealogy is very vitally important. But you have to prove that there were U.S. citizens, and nobody was told that in South Texas for a long time. But that poll tax is going to be a big deal if this lawsuit goes forward. So I'm done with my presentation. I want to thank you all for listening, and I appreciate it, each and every one of you. It's okay, you don't need to applaud. My heart feels like the Indians would say, my heart soars like an eagle, that you guys enjoyed my presentation. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, guys.
Joe,
Yeah.
talk about this right here.
Oh, yeah.
This is a new thing.
You want to talk about it over? Or either one of you guys, I don't care. I got to take a break.
Okay. And one of the things that we have to prove that it's a conspiracy. And in court, there's certain points that need to be considered a conspiracy. You need 2 or more persons involved in it. Of course, you have the United States, Mexico, and the agents involved in doing the negotiation. There has to be an objective. What were they doing? You know that already. It was the treaty. Meaning the participants, meaning of minds. We know they met. It's all documented. And 1 or more unlawful acts. Well, the act itself was that they said that we were Mexican nationals and deprived us of the Fifth and 14th Amendment due process of law. In other words, we should have had the legal right to a court in front of a judge, a jury, and a lawyer representing us, each one of us. And the final one was results of damages. And of course, we know all the damages involved in it. And as the experiment goes up, it goes into other things. False statements of material facts. Again, there we're explaining the false statement on Mexican national. The knowledge on the part of the defendant that their statement is untrue. Well, it wasn't true because we had poll taxes to prove that we were U.S. citizens. And number three, the intent on the part of the defendant to deceive the victims. Okay? Does anybody know what that is? Huh? The way they deceived us was they had the Mexican government look for our ancestors to file these claims. When in fact the United States should have been doing that. And I have a article that was 1938, 37, around there, from the San Antonio Express, where the Mexican consulate in San Antonio was looking for these errors. It was actually in the newspaper. And that's how the whole thing got started. Justifiable reliance on the alleged victim's statement, and we have it. When I went to Washington, D.C., and I got a majority of the major land grant heirs who had petitioned for compensation and injury to the alleged victim as a result. And that's all that's revolving injury by this. Now, where this gets into more detail, right over here, this is the statutes that make a crime a person acting under color. Under color means you work for a government. Any government entity, it could be city, county, state, or federal. Okay? We know for a fact that the federal government is involved in it. They deprived us of our constitutional rights, and they did it as representatives of the United States, and in some cases even the state of Texas and some of the states that we're looking at. Any questions? Okay. Now, the other one, fraud upon a court, well, they didn't set up as a court system, it was more of an arbitration. So the other two really don't count, because I don't think you can go all the way to racketeering. They're just like mafia style where they control everything. But then again, you got the Kennedys and teams who did that racketeering. So, but the thing is that if we could prove this in a United States federal court, it's a domino effect, and it'll after that the states will fall and everything will fall in place. Any other questions? No? Okay. Now the other thing I want to show you are the poll taxes. And on the poll taxes, this is from 1848. Can everybody see that up here? Can you see that? I'll make it bigger. 1848. And this was for the residents of Cameron County. Now, Cameron County was real big. Cameron County, there was no Hidalgo County, so half of Hidalgo County was part of Cameron County, and it went up all the way up to almost Corpus Christi. So that covered a large area. So like San Salvador, the Tulip Church, right? Would probably be, you might find it under here. Because there was no Brooks County, there was no Jim Hogg, there was no Willacy, Kennedy, or none of these counties at the very beginning. But if you can see, this is an example. And these are all the C's here. The poll taxes are all by alphabetical order. And like what Joe was saying, that his ancestor, Jose Manuel Cavazos, they spoke the D too. And if you look up here, you follow it, there's that $1 right here. And you follow it up here, poll tax. Right there. So
even if your ancestors were in Brooks County, okay, say in 1838, you would need to go to Cameron County,
probably,
and then go down and see it.
right.
Okay, because Brooks County and several other counties around, they weren't in existence. Okay.
And I mean, I'm connected to La Vareta. I'm connected to San Martin Ranch, the Chapeno, which was also in the Brownsville. There's Eden Gomez with La Rosa, which was just a little bit north of La Vareta. And those are Gomez, Chapa, and Longoria, and most of them are in here. Now, take it that they pay poll or taxes every year, but like, I mean, I got 20 years or so, you'll find at least one of those years where they did pay a poll tax.
And if you find it, you better hang on to it, because it may be necessary for you to prove it.
But once again, my thing is, you found it here, that doesn't mean you stop. In the next year, it's not there, you keep on going.
Keep on going, right?
Because there's a possibility that after 3 years, they pay full tax.
Exactly. On one of my grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, he's not on here, but his brother is, and they worked the ranch together. But in 1850, Charles Stone killed him, and my great-great-grandfather took over the land. And it wasn't until 1871, 1870, he started paying the taxes on it.
A long process.
It's a very long process for sure. And it's 20 years of these poll taxes, 350 pages.
See, but we didn't know this years ago. This is all starting to develop now. That's why we're having these meetings. So here's my big problem. Where are all the little guys, the kids? I guess we haven't done a good job of getting our kids to be involved in this. I just, everywhere I go, I see all people that are middle-aged or older people. I don't see any young people. I wish we had them.
And you know who got this poll tax? That young boy behind me.
There you go.
He got the poll tax.
We need the young involved with this case, because they're the ones that are going to have to, you know, who knows how long I'm going to live, I don't know. But the problem is, if we aren't, whatever, successful, we need to have all of the families and the children understand that this was injustice. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, like this is 1848, but like we said, it's not always there every year. Because it goes from 1848, and then the next one, it jumps to 1850. So 1849 is missing. But if you go down here, there's his name again. Jose Manuel Cavazos. And there's the poll tax. I think that's under 50 cents.
Now, I'm going to say that this is not the only way to prove citizenship. There's a couple other ways. I don't know, I got in kind of late, I was bringing some other stuff, extension points, some other stuff. So I'm not sure what was discussed, it should have been discussed, but anyway, I'll reiterate it, it wasn't. There's litigation that happens within families' properties where they lost property. I've tried to look for a document that I have on our family and to show you that exactly what I'm talking about, where there's a history of litigation. Maria Josefa Vazos Espiritu Santo ended up going to court. She died going to court, winning, losing, winning, and then finally losing. Her sons and daughters continued to fight. So you have a span here of litigation, legal litigation, where the property was being taken away illegally. Okay.
1872 was that case.
Right. And you have a span that covers past that year that Joe Sierra was talking about, of the Treaty of Guadalupe, where our ancestors were guaranteed to become U.S. citizens 1 year after their property. So therefore, if you're going past 1849, February 28th, then if you're in litigation in the court, you have proof of that the people, our ancestors were there in their property. And that is proof to show that you were fighting for, your families were fighting for the properties, and citizenship comes with that. Okay, also livestock tax.
That's all here, but they didn't do a good job of it.
But these are three avenues that you need to look into. And one thing that I do urge you is to look as quick as possible and as soon as possible, because the direction that we're going, you know the history where records have been burnt, lost, and stuff like that, disappearing. Make no mistake, we're against the United States, the most powerful country. We are Americans, the most powerful country in the world. They got access to everything. They can make it disappear too. Make no mistake, we're against the Kennedy Ranch, the King Ranch, the petroleum industry. So we're up against titans. But what's going to help us? We're little people, we're a smaller group of people, even though we're in the millions. This is what's going to help us. The Constitution of the United States claiming we're Americans. That's what I was talking to you at the beginning, when we started the meeting. We're seeking for justice. And we believe in the Constitution of the United States. It is there for all people are created equal. So, but be careful. Go into the archives and start looking for your information. Sometimes we can help and sometimes we can't on that particular thing. We're asking people to do this on your own because it is, understand there's 344 land grants, and then it's a lot of documentation on what we're asking you people to look into. We're doing our own.
They have to help us.
To bring this proof forward and win this case. And as Joe said, one can be overlooked as, well, we overlooked it. But if we get 20, 100 people, that's not an overlooked case. You got 100 people, 50 people that are coming and saying the same thing and showing full text, then there's the conspiracy, what Elmer was talking about.
The fraud.
The fraud. Do people understand where we're going on this?
What did you guys think of this presentation, by the way? What did you think about what they're saying? Go ahead. We need feedback from you guys. Go ahead.
I got, you said there were 3 or more. You said there, one of them is the poll tax, the other one is the cattle.
Well, they'll be all
What's the
together.
cattle, because of the brand or because of the sales?
No, they actually tax the amount of cattle that
They,
we have.
well, they had to register, everybody that owned cattle had to register with the county, and they actually kept records of everything they owned.
see that?
Chickens, cows, whatever.
You see the cattle right there? Right. Is the cattle?
Now, let me explain something about this that I don't, Elmer hasn't talked about it, and that's well, you want me to talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay. On the cattle and when the United States was fighting in Mexico, went into war, they confiscated all cattle, chickens, and started feeding the American soldiers with promising to pay back. Was any of that money ever paid back to them? No. So here, what's being created? Look at it. Look at the picture that I just said. America, the government of the United States gathers in all the, like it's gathering right now, building the wall, and confiscates all the Spanish Mexican land grants, their livestock. They're ranchers. That's their livelihood. That's what they depended on in selling meat, poultry, eggs.
Here's a cutaway.
They were cutting their throats off. So they were depriving them. They never got paid back. So there was a conspiracy of the United States to subdue, to eliminate the land grantees. Now do you see the situation on this? This all was never, none of this money was ever paid back.
This,
Go ahead.
okay, this is what he's talking about. This was a claim, this is an abstract of claims for damages by U.S. troops in the Rio Grande in 1848 and 1849. Now, this is just a cutaway example. This is what my great-great-great-grandfather when he did shop. And he had his cattle, he had cattle near Brownsville, and he had cattle up there towards down Kenyon County. So you can see here, cattle, we had 1,528 cattle, and 480 horses. And look at the amount. The amount he lost is $56,149. So look, $56,000. Could you imagine that in 1848? How much money is that today?
When you move it to the left, it says, no, my left, this is in the what?
In the Rio Grande.
So you see, the United States was involved. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were breaking these people. And to me, this smells like a conspiracy all the way through. It was intentional.
Here's another example. Here's Guadalupe Valle. Guadalupe Valle had her cattle in Padre. I came back home from Washington, D.C., from the National Archives, read her testimony. Who testified against her? The expert witness of the defense for the United States was Kennedy, King, Blavik, Stillman. All the people who stole her land were the expert witness. And they claimed that in 1848, Guadalupe Calabasas had no cattle. But here we have that she had 612 cattle and 84 horses, 1 mule, and damages.
The famous Longhorn came from the Spanish people. Okay. How can there be no Longhorns in South Texas?
They claim there was a drought during that time and all the animals had died and this and that. But I found the orders from General Taylor. He had his headquarters in Matamoros. And when General Winton Scott was going to attack Mexico City, he had put out an order to start collecting all the horses and cattle for food. When they first started this war, they actually, some of the soldiers were killing some of the ranchers' cattle, and General Taylor didn't like it. But when they knew they were going to do a main thrust into the heart of Mexico, that they needed supplies and they didn't have it. And so then he set up a commission or to start documenting all this. And the person who documented this was Stephen Powers. He was an attorney, he was a diplomat, he was attorney for Kennedy and King later, but he was appointed by President Polk to work in the claims for the United States, against the United States. So this is actually in his own handwriting.
Let me say this to you. Are those guys smart or what? I mean, you're hearing things you haven't heard anyway. But it's just you.
These are things that haven't been brought up by other organizations.
We have been trying to get people. We don't even charge anybody. Please come and listen. We're not asking you for anything. Do we need donations? Yeah, we're about broke. We could use them, but that's not why I'm asking this. What I'm telling you is if we don't catch fire and we don't get people to understand that they need to stand up for their rights, then we're just wasting our time. And in 6 months, I'm going back home. I can look in the mirror when I get back to Illinois. I can say, we tried. But I look at a lot of people here and I ask them, can you do that? Can you look in the mirror, say you tried? So it is important that we get people, and we hope that you can spread the word for us because there's empty chairs here. But talking to empty chairs is not going to solve this problem. Getting people united is going to solve this problem. But if I can't light that fire, I don't know how to do it. Go ahead.
I'm going to suggest something, okay? There are several cases, right now I don't have mine, where people have won the cases. And one of them is King Ranch, okay? Where their headquarters is, okay? They had to pay the family, okay, several $1 million. This is documented. The only thing is, you really have to dig to find the information. And the reason you have to really dig is because they don't want it exposed.
Right.
Well, most of these cases,
Okay.
they seal them.
Huh?
They make, most of these were settled out of court, in lawsuits, and then they were sealed. Which means they cannot be opened.
Because when they tried to get the documentation from King Ranch, the original documents, okay, the story goes that the Texas Rangers, okay, and other of the government agencies were involved where the documents didn't appear when they should. And now they're under lock and key.
Do you believe that? I'm asking you.
I believe that the family got the money. Okay?
Because if you believe it, you should be angry. Because no one should be making deals with anybody and allowing the information to be sealed when all of us are involved.
Correct. But it's done.
I understand. But as a human being, as a descendant, you should be outraged.
Oh, I am.
And
The only thing is, it is very hard, okay?
Maybe that's one of the
It
things that
is
we.
very hard for poor people like myself, or even somebody that's upper middle class, to financially back up and really go out for it. What you know is yours. That's like the ranch that I investigated, okay? It goes because my grandparents, okay, knew about it, my great-grandparents knew about it, and then the third one, that's where the family comes in on the ranch, where they say, okay, and none of them are alive right now, they say that she signed with an X, the ranch, okay? And now, nobody's interested. I'm not interested on the money value. I'm interested in the injustice, like you
There you
said,
go.
that
There
was
you go.
done because you're talking about 17,000 acres. Okay? And it included brooks, The only thing is, everything is documented in Stark County. Okay? But it is very, very hard, like I said, for you to buck the system when money talks.
Okay, let me tell you. I came here 6 months ago and I brought these two guys together and we created this organization. Why? We didn't even know what we're telling you right now on this stage. We didn't even know this. We came and we said we got to do one thing. And what was that one thing? Unite the people. We have to get credibility with people, and we have to unite the people by the three of us forging a new organization. It's not looking to make 30% of your money, 20%. We're not lawyers. We're people like you. But we know this injustice has to be dealt with. So what did we ask? Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to talk about that unity we were talking about, and I'm going to go into a plan that we have very, very strongly thought into, put some time into it, and it is what Joe had put together. That is Plan A. So Plan A is probably going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Okay? Make no mistake about that. And it's going to take some money. Okay, so eventually we have these meetings. We're not charging anything. And we tell the people, it's going to come a time where we're going to ask, when we have enough people, when we have Laredo, Brownsville, McAllen, Corpus, San Antonio, all together. And believe me, we've caught a lot of wind. You might not know it by now, but we got a big, big wind behind our sails. We're moving very good. But in saying that, it's going to come a time, and this is where I'm leading to, that we're going to be asking for we're starting, but it has to go in conjunction with the number that I'm going to give you. $100 per descendant at sorry, I lost my train of thought. $100 per descendant, and we're looking for 100,000, at least 100,000 descendants. Right now we have, how many descendants, Primo? 9 million descendants off of these land grants. 100,000 is a drop in the pocket to get. That's what our starting point is. It could be more. Less, we're going to have problems. 100,000 times $100 a piece. The more that we have, the lesser the quantity would be. 100 times 100,000, that's $10 million. $10 million, we're going to divide it into 3 different sections in a trust fund. 3.3 million for Plan A. It's by, in this case, what you see, all the way to the Supreme Court. Litigation fees, by fees, I mean, not what the attorney's charging. That, we're planning to get an attorney a contingency on a very, the lowest rate you can get. But litigations, court filing fees, maybe traveling, stuff like that. Maybe you, sir, you have to testify. Bring your documentation, and we'll help you get there so you can testify. Whatever the case may be, but it's in this case. Okay. Now, hold on, let me see. I got to go through my 3 plans, sir, and then you can ask me any questions, please. Then, the question was asked, what happens if this case, we lose it at the Supreme Court? It can't. Because this is why I started saying, politically, we have to change the face of politics and also the judicial. Why the judicial? The next president is going to probably install 2 Supreme Court justices. And if we have, I'm going to tell you, we have justices that are installed that are against what we're doing, then we don't have a chance in the Supreme Court. justices that are for what we are doing, our cause, then we're gonna have a better chance in a ruling. Because there's no jury, there's the judges that are there, the Supreme Court justice. This is why it's important for us to unite in the vote. I started that when the meeting started. You might have not been here, so, but anyway, that's what part of the speech. But anyway, that would be Plan B. Plan B goes into effect right after we lose the case at the Supreme Court. What is Plan B? It's going to go file the lawsuit in the World Court in The Hague, Netherlands. Now we're at the world stage, because they're going to be able to see this whole demonstration, how it came about. Now, at that point, that would be the last solution that we have in settling that. Now, let's say Plan A succeeds, then the money off of that we have stored away in trust for the 3.3 for Plan B gets returned to the people, which is $33. You're a descendant, you paid $100, you get your $33 back. The other part is for Plan A. What is Plan? Remember, there's 3/3. Plan C. Plan C is to finance this organization, okay, in getting an auditorium, football fields. Not only that, we're also planning on transporting people from McAllen, from Brownsville, from Corpus, Laredo. Let's say we have a rally in Austin, Washington, D.C. We charter buses. The organization will pay the charter buses. All you have to do is show that you are who you are, and you paid your $100, get on board, we'll take you to Washington, D.C. to show unity at the state level, to show unity at the national level. Now, also, some of that money can help the people that are being transported for lodging. Part of the money can go, let's say a hotel room goes for $50. Maybe the organization will pay half of it, or the whole fee. So I know that it'd be impossible to feed everybody. So you might have to, everybody might have to feed themselves, but maybe we can take care of the transportation and the lodging, or part of the lodging. These are the things that we're looking into, how we're going to spend that $100 that we're talking about. But it has to accumulate to 100,000 people. If we get 20,000, it's not going to happen. The numbers are not there. So how do we do that? By talking to you, spreading the word. The more that we get into this organization as members, the lesser the money that each one of us has to pay. I'm going to have to pay. He's going to have to pay. Elmer's going to have to pay. Each one of you has to pay that $100. There's also, might be a thing where, let's say, I have 4 kids, and not the primary, because only the primary is going to pay. And only the primary is going to get the benefit of that moving around that I'm talking about. Let's say I pass away. Then there's at least one fee, and I have 4 kids. Well, one kid can get by my fee that I already paid, but the other 3 are going to have to end up paying. They're going to end up paying that $100, because now each one of those of my 4 kids are primaries. I'm dead. I'm gone. So it continues, because it has to be that way. These are things that we're looking into. So you understand that we're not looking at a short picture. We're looking at it as the biggest picture that we can look at. This has got to be the final ball game that we're going to play with this issue of the injustice that has been done to our families.
What was your question, sir?
No, are Are you finished?
I answered it?
No, but go ahead and finish.
No, okay, I'm done, that's,
Okay, nowadays, and I'm pretty sure that we've all been involved in some way or another. There's too many, and don't get me wrong, okay? But I don't know who you are and you don't know who I am. There's too many scams going on, okay?
Wait a
Like I
minute.
said, just hear me out.
We understand.
Okay? There was an organization sometime back called, it was an organization for the same thing, and they charged a fee. Okay? And they resolved several cases, okay, and they won. And that's what they were banking on, okay? The only thing is, it dissolved. Why? Because when you get a group and you see a lot of dollars, okay, you start thinking, no matter how honest you are, okay, of how you have to charge your expenses now, which started to say 50,000, say a year, and this was 10 or 20 years ago, okay? But like I said, here in the valley, I've seen it, and that's what I'm leery of, okay?
It's understandable.
Okay, and
Wait, I'm gonna ask you something.
yes,
Our presentation up here, does it include your organization? I mean, not organization.
no, they
Your
didn't come up
descendant-
with,
No, your land grants. Are we not helping you in your, whatever land grant you're in?
you enlightened me in several things,
Okay,
as to how to get documentation, okay?
Let me
That I
explain
was
something.
not aware of.
Let me explain something to you. We're all broke. None of us got any money. We've spent thousands of dollars doing this. And look at the amount of people we have here. You think we can do this forever?
No, but,
Okay, wait. We already have what we need. You saw my ancestor, Jose Manuel Cavazos. I don't care about your land grant. Is that what we're saying to you? No, we care about your land grant. We care about everyone, all 433. That's why we're doing what we're doing. We're not out to make money. This is to educate the people. That you should have noticed that's the difference right away between us and everybody else. Nobody has ever educated the people like we have. Yes, you've had organizations that have done some good and stole money, but look what we're trying to do. Because you see, I could say right now, you know what, forget it, fellas, nobody's interested. Let's just us concentrate on our case, the hell with everybody else. But that's what we decided not to do. Because it is important, but if you don't get it and other people don't get it, then we're just wasting our time.
And we're not just stopping here, because in September 24th, 25th, 26th, we're going to New Mexico. Same presentation, but this is a national conference of all the Spanish Mexican land grants.
okay, like I said, okay, and I don't mean,
We're not offended, trust me. We
But-
love you guys, they can't believe
Yeah,
it.
and I like to educate people on
okay,
certain issues.
like I said, I appreciate the enlightenment you all have given me, okay? But my suggestion is for the future, that you start counting the cases that people have presented and where they have won, okay? Because there are quite a few, okay? And dig like I did on the King Ranch, on the Kennedy, where it's not in black and white, it's sealed, but there's still ways of getting information, okay? And like I said,
Is the King Ranch important to the Lagorias? Is the King Ranch important to the Chapas? I mean, see what I'm saying to you? The King Ranch is only important to people that have interest in the King Ranch. There's 432 other land grants that don't have any interest in Narciso Cavazos or whoever that land grant is that you're talking about. So my point to you is, this was a special presentation to show you everybody. Go ahead.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
okay, and like I said, I appreciate what information you gave me,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you.
And I appreciate what you're trying to do.
On behalf of
But
all, thank you.
like I said, nowadays, there's so many people, okay,
We know.
that come up with so many different ways, you know. Like I said, I'm not trying to insult you.
You're not insulting us.
Okay.
We
you
love
know,
the
but sometimes,
feedback.
like my dad used to say, you sometimes say what you feel and it's not appropriate, okay? But, you know, and like I said, you know, I've got a lot of information. And in fact, I've got your card from the other day, not from 2 days. Why?
Okay.
Because I was interested and I had to do a little research on you all, okay?
That's fine.
So, you know,
Let me ask you this. You seem to be a very outspoken man, and I appreciate that. You have courage. What do you think our ancestors were doing in 1848? When they were losing their land one at a time, Arnulfo brought this up one day, and he says, we're no different than we were 200 years ago.
Well, no unity.
No unity. That's
Well,
why they
actually-
lost their lands.
Each
And
one
that's
fell,
why we have
one
to get
by
everybody
themselves.
together.
Each one was fighting their own war, their own property.
Well,
It's always been like that.
well,
We're
actually,
trying to unite.
1848, believe it or not, when the American troops were here, we actually thought, because, remember, this area was still under control of Mexico. It was still under the jurisdiction of Mexico all the way to the Mississippi River up to 1848. And we actually thought we are going to be part of the United States. We never thought we were going to be part of Texas, to tell the truth. And one of the things that I want to get at is a certain incident that happened in 1876. I want to jump to 1876. It's called the Skinner's War. Okay? What happened was some bandidos from Mexico attacked a little town just outside of Corpus Christi. I think they killed like 5 people and stole a lot of horses and cattle. But it riled the citizens of Corpus Christi, including Kennedy Kings, who were living there at the time. And they got together and they burned every ranch and hung every Mexican and their owners all the way from north of Spirit all the way down south. And from my family at Remino Chapa, he was there when that happened. And they didn't hang him, but they shot him in the head. And he was 71 years old when they shot him. But he survived. So I guess he had a hard head and a bullet bounced off his head, and he had a big hole right here. But it took him a few years to die afterwards. I think he had a stroke. I guess it was bleeding internally, and he was dying little by little like that. But this is an indication of how much of a fraud this document is. He's selling, Remigio Chapa selling to the guy named Robert Miller. And this is for piece of La Laveta. Where's La Laveta? But what I want to show you here, there's La Laveta. La Laveta. But what I want to show you is that, well, I didn't know this again. This Robert Miller was a gambling buddy of the attorneys, Jim Wells and Stephen Power. And this deed supposedly is a quitclaim deed. Of all things, it's a quitclaim, which means that it's a deed usually passed over from one family to another without any guaranteeing of any rights. But look at the year it was done, 1876. It was the same year when we burned all the ranches. And the other thing that makes us a problem doctor, where are the witnesses? Every deed back then had to have at least 2 witnesses. If the person signed with an X, you need a 3 witnesses. Proof of fraud. And there is no witnesses on it. And you'll find most of these lands, especially up there, there are lots between, I say, 1871 to 1880, 1881. A lot of these lands came out like that. If you really want to know about your family's history, and you really have the time and patience, go to the Jim Wells records, the Frisco Library at East Austin. It's the Jim Wells files. And there's hundreds of boxes. And like me, I was looking into the Chapa family, and I found so much more. But if you go to the Jim Wells, you'll find a lot. In your case, I bet you attorney, his name was A.J. Leo. He ran the Hidalgo County Park, but he worked neck and neck with Wells and Power, who represented Candy and Dean and all this stuff.
Well, we're coming to the end here. What do you think about what we're doing? Just tell us. Bad, good? Are you interested, not interested?
No.
Do we make sense? How about that? There's a good one. Do we make sense?
Should we stop
No,
presenting
don't
what
stop.
we're presenting?
Don't stop, because, like I said, you gave me information that I didn't know about. Wherever you go, okay, most of us are going to take something up that we didn't know. And I thank you because you took the patience to listen to me,
Absolutely.
okay? You might not agree, but I bet you learned a little bit about me and about what I said. Just like I learned from you all, like I said, everything, the poll tax, the cattle, where it's,
That's exactly what I said at the beginning of my speech.
Correct.
That
Okay, and then
I'm
that's-
planning on learning from you people
yeah,
as much as.
it's both ways, it's every
Yeah.
way.
No, you're right.
And
And as you know, our agenda is to unite. That's our main agenda. But I'm going to share something with you. What we're dealing with out here is tough. Because a lot of it is, and don't take it wrong, I don't mean this wrong, just ignorance. We were invited to a family reunion. 5,000 people were going to be there. Please come. But the person that was in charge of the reunion refused to allow us to give our little presentation. You know why? Because they belong to a followers organization, and they didn't want people to hear anything different than what they already know.
no, well,
So you see, we're up against this. I know you're not in my shoes,
Another thing that we're up against.
but
is
we're
that-
trying to explain to you how difficult it is to get people to understand
no.
that
like I said,
everyone needs to be part of this.
I know what you're going through. I'm going to suggest something, okay? Here in this library, and just about every library, we have a genealogy section. In there, there's genealogy organizations, okay, societies. Go there and see and get their mailing list, okay? And over the phone or over an email, talk to them, get their feedback, okay? And they're interested in genealogy and they're interested in their past. A lot of them would like to start digging into how their relatives lost their property,
Right.
okay? And they just don't know where else to get the information. Once again, what you say is
That's a
great.
good heads
The
up.
unity. And in these societies, the most you'll see is say 50 or 75. Now, if you were to get, and they do have a yearly get-together, where there's thousands of them, okay? And we're starting to communicate with each other, whereas 10 or 20 years ago, it didn't happen.
Right.
I'm looking for mine. Forget about yours. Now we're starting to get together and say, okay, you have Gebra, I have Gebra. You have Ramita, why don't we exchange information?
Well, that's
But
what,
it's
one of the
taken a
first
long
things
time.
I wanted to say is that, like on this poll tax, I had the first 20 years. You're welcome to it. Do you have a thumb drive with you? If you don't have a thumb drive, you could mail me one with a and I'll load it for you and just have everything filled out and I'll send it back to you.
Okay. So like I said, it's, the only thing is, like I said, is we need to get together. And we're starting to because of that apparatus,
Right.
okay? And we're starting to communicate and then we exchange phone numbers. Now, it doesn't cost you per minute. You know, you could give me your life history on the cell phone, and it costs the same thing as it, you know,
Yeah.
okay?
You're right.
Whereas, say, 10 years ago, you had to watch the minutes. With a computer, you had to watch, you know, everything was in money's tight, and it's getting worse,
Things have changed.
okay? Now, some of those in those societies are professionals. They have PhDs that are interested in genealogy. Okay, there's doctors, there's lawyers, okay? And I talked to several. One is Gela here in Donna, and maybe you should get with them,
I'm a ghetto too.
okay?
My mom's a Calazo ghetto.
Okay? My mom's side is Gela, okay? But if you, you know, then maybe talk to him. And if you would like, you can go to the internet and I'll get you his email address, okay? And he's on my list, and I, you know, and maybe you need to start communicating, you know. But like I said, you're doing great.
We're trying.
Yeah, no, you're doing great, okay? You
Let me
just
ask
need
you something.
to, like I said, these society, genealogy, that's where you need, that's where you're gonna get the
Let me
interest.
ask you something, you touched a little bit on it, are you, if you like what you saw here, are you gonna spread the word about it?
Definitely.
Huh?
He said definitely.
How?
He said definitely.
Oh, he said, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Not how, I didn't ask how. If you were gonna tell your friends that are descendants or anybody.
I am, okay?
Thank you,
You know, I'm not,
thank you.
my genealogy is open to everybody. I have over 3,000 relatives that I've looked at, okay? And I would have a lot more, but, okay, but that's what we need.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for
the
that.
people that I know, I'm gonna say, look, these individuals, they gave a presentation, okay? It was fantastic. If you come into your area, okay, go visit them. And then I'm gonna say, if you would like more information, okay, here's a email address, or here's a phone number. No. Like I said, nowadays, phone doesn't cost anything. The internet is free. So don't worry, you know, I sometimes might sound like I'm putting you down, but I'm not.
Oh, we understand,
Okay.
no, we
Yeah.
love the feedback, Sam, we
Yeah,
really
because-
do. We like to talk back and
Your
forth.
conversation makes us better.
Yeah, and like I said, your card, you were going to give me one today. No. You were coming,